All right, so we are almost done with the notes. The last thing we're going to do is look at gender development and how it is a mixture of both nature and nurture influences. So right off the bat, we need to get two terms straight. Sex and gender, they're usually used interchangeably when you're just like talking to someone in just average everyday normal life. But when we are in psychology class and we are talking about nature and nurture effects on sex and gender, it's important to realize that they are two completely different things. So sex is a biological category for males and females. It is determined by your chromosomal pairings. So XX determines a biological female and XY indicates a biological male. So that is it's a nature category. Our nurture category is gender. So gender is actually socially constructed. It is molded by the whatever culture you live in, by its gender expectations and gender roles for how men and women should act, dress, speak, all sorts of things. But that is a social category, so it's on the nurture side of the spectrum. Again, it's fine if you use these interchangeably outside of the class, but inside of class, we're going to use these as two different terms. All right, so let's start with the nature side of sex. So like I said earlier, XX indicates a biological female, while XY indicates a biological male. The egg is always going to have an X chromosome because women have XX pairings, so all eggs have an X, while the sperm is either going to have an X or a Y because men have XY chromosomal pairings. So it just depends on the chromosome that the sperm is carrying. That is going to indicate what sex biologically the offspring is. We also know that testosterone and sex hormones have a lot to do with the development of sex over time. So let's start with just testosterone is probably the most well-known sex hormone. It's in males and females, but it's in a larger amount in males. It stimulates the growth of male sex organs in the fetus during development, and it also helps to develop the male sex characteristics during puberty. So again, testosterone is in males and females, so it's just more in males, and it's more active during certain times in males' life, or the lives of males. We can see if you look at the picture over on the right, it has a huge influence on our bodies. It has more on males, obviously. It stimulates the growth of body hair and sperm production and stuff like that in men. But in both sexes, it allows for muscle growth. It aids in libido, which is your sex drive. It helps in competition. It helps in red blood cell production. It helps to maintain your bone density. So it does a lot of things in both sexes. Again, it's just more prevalent and more active in males. But the reason we're talking about this is because our biology can affect our assumption of gender. So usually if a person is born in as a biological male, then they will assume the gender of a male. Same thing with a female. Female is born biologically female, then they usually accept the gender role of the female in that culture. But there are circumstances, very rare circumstances, in which a biological male may experience a botched circumcision and then is raised as a female, so receiving estrogen supplements to try to combat the testosterone. They might even experience extreme female gentrification, so thrown into female-related activities, maybe put into like ballet, and then really like dressed in pink and given all these dolls and things like that to try to help the child assume a female gender identity. What typically happens in these cases is that the child experiences huge gender confusion, specifically around puberty, when testosterone starts to become active, and the child is confused about how they are biologically feeling and how their gender role is supposed to make them feel. So again, it's really, really rare, but it's just an example of how our biology, how our nature can affect our nurture or our gender. Okay, so that's a great segue into gender. So just to define some of these words, a role is a set of expectations or norms about a social position. So if we're talking about gender roles, then we're talking about the expectations that go with the female and male genders. So how they should behave, how they should act, what jobs they should have, how they should speak to one another. All those things would be under your gender roles. And gender roles are culturally bound, so they can change between cultures, and they're also time and context specific. So what that means is that they can change over time. They are fluid over time. So if we look at the graph on the bottom left, this is the percent of the female population in these countries disagreeing with the statement that being a housewife is fulfilling. So you can see that people in these different countries and different cultures had different ideas about the gender role of a wife or a woman. And then if you look at the graph to the right, this is the percentage of people agreeing with the statement, the activities of married women are best confined to the home and family. And if you look at the way that men and women have responded to that over time, you can see that there over time has been a shift in the idea about women being confined to the home. So next is gender identity, and this is one's own sense of being male or female. It used to be opinion that this didn't develop until puberty, but what research has shown is that a child's gender identity actually develops really, really early on in life, and it is influenced in part by how that child's culture kind of puts gender on them. So, play with these toys, or don't do these things, or wear pink, wear blue. That kind of gentrification that happens in early childhood. And then when a person's gender identity doesn't match up with what society thinks should be their gender, that starts to confuse people. And so you can see that with the magazine cover here on the right. That's Angelina Jolie's child, Shiloh, and that's an old magazine cover. She's older than that. But there was this huge outcry when her child started dressing like a boy. And I don't know how Shiloh, I don't know what her gender identity is and how she perceives herself, but people really got upset about it, which is kind of silly there. But just the thing to take away from this is that your gender identity is your own sense of being male or female, and it may or may not match up with what society sees you as being male or female. All right, so our two theories on gender are the social learning theory of gender and the gender schema theory. There are many theories on how gender develops, so we're just going to talk about these two. Before we start talking about the social learning theory of gender specifically, you can apply social learning theory to any socially learned behavior. So that could be gender, it could be cooperativeness, it could be aggression, it could be altruism. It can be applied to anything that you learn from your environment. In this case, we're going to be talking about gender. So the social learning theory of gender says that children learn social behavior by observing people in their environment, imitating them, and then being rewarded or punished based on those imitations. So an example of this would be like a little girl goes into the bathroom and sees her dad shaving, and she wants her dad to put shaving cream on her face so that she can shave as well. And the dad says, no, girls don't shave. So essentially that's a punishment. She's being corrected in her imitations. So what she's taken away from that situation is that, oh, okay, well, I shouldn't ask to shave anymore because girls don't shave. Dad does that and boys do that, but I don't do that. So she's starting to develop more of her ideas on her own gender and gender in general. Another example would be like a boy falls off a bike. He starts to cry. Someone around him, it could be a friend or maybe it could even be a parent, says, big boys don't cry. And so now he's been punished and he learns that, okay, well, boys don't cry. That's not associated with the male gender role. And so he'll start to hide that emotion going forward. If you want to think of another example of being rewarded, it could be something like, and these are all very simple examples, like a girl goes into the kitchen and sees her mom cooking and wants to help. And the mother says, oh, you're just my little helper. You're such a good little girl. You'll grow up to be, a great mom one day. Well, she's been rewarded for participating in that gendered behavior. So she'll start to associate cooking and being in the kitchen with the female gender. And again, these are very simple examples, but they work to illustrate the social learning theory. All right, our other theory is a gender schema theory. This is the idea that children form concepts about gender, and then they adjust their behavior and thoughts according to those concepts. Schema, you see that on the slide here. A schema is just another word for a concept or a grouping of things. And schemas allow us to organize the world. We don't like randomness. We like to put things into categories, including gender. So from a very young age, children start to develop male and female schemas, and then they organize the world by putting in their life experiences and their observations into these different groupings. So the female schema might include things like cooking, long hair, the color pink, being a teacher, or wearing a skirt. While the male schema might include things like being rough, the color blue, being an airplane pilot, or wearing pants or having short hair. And throughout childhood, as gender becomes more solidified, children have to modify these schemas. They do it through two ways. One is assimilation and the other is accommodation. So assimilation is when you're basically just adding things, adding new life experiences into your existing schema. So this would be like the first time that a little boy learns what an airplane pilot is, and he realizes that all the cartoons he watches with airplane pilots have those pilots as being men. The toys he plays with that have airplane pilots, they're men as well. And so he'll go ahead and put the job of airplane pilot into his male schema. So he's adding something new into that schema. That's assimilation. Accommodation is when you actually have to change your schemas based on your life experiences. You might have to add exceptions or make exclusions for certain things in your schemas. So an example would be like the first time that a child sees a male with long hair. And the child looks to their parent and says, what a funny looking lady. That's because their female schema has told them that females have long hair, not males. So now the parent looks at the child and says, you know what, actually that is a male who just has long hair. So the child then has to accommodate their female and male schemas to include new information. So they have to accommodate their female schema to exclude males with long hair, and they have to accommodate their male schema to include males with long hair. So they're constantly assimilating new experiences into their schemas and also accommodating their schemas to adapt to changing situations and new things that they're learning. All right, so you guys are done with the notes. Woohoo! The last thing you need to do today before you go is to fill out the BEMRL sex inventory. So let me pull that up on my computer. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this in front of you. It does have a bottom. You are not going to be doing parts 2 and 3 today. You need more information to do those parts. So all you're doing today is just part 1. So you have 60 traits or characteristics in front of you. And you need to go through each of these traits and rate each one on a scale of 1 to 7 on how well it describes you. So 1 would be never or almost never true, and then 7 would be almost or almost always true. So rate each one, all 60 of them, on that 1 to 7 scale. When you are done with those 60 terms, you are good to go. Again, you cannot do any of this until tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over what the BEM sex role inventory actually is, and you'll also learn more about what androgyny is and how it is studied. All right, so I've missed you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.